All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think we have a good crew of people here today. Welcome to the Farm to School Grant Refresh for fiscal year 23 grantees. My name is Emily Mayer, and I manage the Farm to School grants at the Department of Agriculture. And then Kate Siebold, she's also on the call. She also works for MDA and helps with Farm to School. And then we have some other Farm to School friends on the call as well who will talk later. But if you're just joining us, please put your name and your school in the chat, just so we can get a sense of who's here today. What we're going to do in this refresher webinar, we're going to go over kind of high level Farm to School guidelines for the fiscal year 23 grants. They are a little bit different from regular MDA Farm to School grants. So we'll kind of hit on all those points. We'll discuss making your grant purchases. So if you have a food grant and or an equipment grant, we'll kind of go over the information that you need to submit when you're trying to get your reimbursements. We'll talk about the reporting requirements, resources and support. We have lots of great farm to school resources that we'll share with you so you can utilize them and be able to use them in your planning and your programming. And then at the very end, we'll do a quick Q&A at the very end. So if you have questions throughout, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Otherwise, you can unmute yourself at the end and ask away. So we'll go to the next slide. All right, so fiscal year 23 Farm to School grants. The overall purpose of these grants is to increase the amount of Minnesota grown and raised foods used in school nutrition programs, and then also to expand marketing opportunities for small businesses and socially disadvantaged farmers throughout Minnesota. These grants can be used to purchase unprocessed and minimally processed Minnesota grown and raised foods. And then if you received a kitchen equipment grant, you can also use your funds to purchase equipment to help your school buy, prepare, and serve more locally grown foods. So fiscal year 23 grants are a little bit unique in that we received additional funding from the USDA Local Foods for Schools Cooperative Agreement Program, which gave us almost $3.5 million to use to purchase local foods, which is fantastic. But with that comes a little bit of extra reporting and purchasing rules. So we'll go over that in a minute. Really quick, so the grant timelines for fiscal year 23 grants. There are two separate contracts. So there's the food contract, and then there's also an equipment contract if you were awarded equipment funds. Not everybody who has a food contract has equipment funds. So if you have questions about that, feel free to send me a follow-up email and I can help you figure that piece out. But food contracts, the end date for those contracts has been extended to January 31st, 2025. So that means you have until that date to make purchases on your local foods that you'll be serving in your school programs. Then the final reporting date for those expenses will be March 31st of 2025. That's when you're going to be the very last date to submit your items for reimbursement and your final report for the grant program. For equipment contracts, the end date for that is a little bit different. So you have until August 31st to spend those grant funds. And then your final report for that contract is due within 30 days of the end date of that contract. And I will just throw a little note out there. If you finish either of these contracts before these end dates, you can submit your items for reimbursement early. So feel free to do that and get your reimbursement sooner. I'll pass it to Kate.
Yes. All right. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what exactly you can spend your fiscal year 23 funds on, since that is the main purpose of this grant. And as Emily mentioned, especially because your fiscal year 23 grants are using federal funds, there are some specific kind of rules or requirements and definitions that we have to follow when making local food purchases for this. So first off, your fiscal year 23 food funds are intended to be spent on meals being served in the National School Lunch Program or the the School Breakfast Program. And I should mention that with the National School Lunch Program, that includes the Seamless Summer option and the After School Snack Program. But you can't use any of your grant funds to purchase food that you're going to be serving in the summer food service program. You also can't use the food that you're purchasing for family or community events, classroom lessons and activities, or the fresh fruit and vegetable program. So just make sure that you're using your funds to purchase food that you're going to be serving in one of those two required federal meal programs. In terms of what types of foods you can purchase, the biggest things to note is that the food that you're buying needs to be grown or raised in Minnesota, and that food needs to continue to be then stored, processed, distributed within Minnesota or within 400 miles. Within that, then the food needs to be unprocessed or minimally processed. And I'll be sharing some examples of what exactly we mean by that. But when we're talking about minimally processed, the really big things to keep in mind is that the food items can't contain any additives, flavors, coloring, preservatives, and generally, the USDA says that something doesn't qualify as minimally processed if it's involving the mixture of multiple ingredients. So we're really looking for food that's kind of in its kind of inherent state. So eligible items include fruits and vegetables, meat, fish, and poultry, dairy products excluding fluid milk, eggs, beans and legumes, grains, non-eligible items would be fluid milk, processed items like hot dogs, breads, any items that are grown or raised outside of Minnesota. We also can't reimburse you for, garden produce that's being grown like on your school grounds in a school garden. And then, as I mentioned, we can't reimburse you for any items that are purchased for a meal or snack outside of the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program. We do have a fiscal year 23 eligible food overview document that we've actually just recently updated that we'll be emailing out to all grantees. And that is a great resource to kind of go to when you have questions as to whether or not an item's eligible. And both Emily and myself at MDA are happy to answer questions. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're ever wondering, if a certain item is eligible or not. So just some examples of things that are or are not eligible when we're talking about fruits and vegetables. That includes you can buy fresh, frozen, canned, dried fruits or vegetables. Again, we're just looking here, no preservatives, colors, flavorings being added. They can be pre-cut. 100% juice that's made with Minnesota grown fruits and vegetables, and that would need to be also like made and distributed here within Minnesota would be eligible. Something like kimchi, even if each of the items like carrots, cabbage, and radishes are grown in Minnesota, it's not eligible because again, you're mixing multiple ingredients. For dairy products, eligible items include butter, plain yogurt, cheese, including cheese curds, cream or buttermilk, but fluid milk is not eligible. Cheese that has added ingredients, so for instance, a cheese that has cranberries in it, that would not be eligible. And then yogurt with added flavors or ingredients would not be eligible. An important point with the milk is that if you're buying something like yogurt or butter, the actual milk being used needs to be coming from cows in Minnesota, and that all of the processing, storage, and distribution of the milk and then the dairy product needs to be happening within Minnesota or within 400 miles. Then for meats, this is a bit of a longer list since this is something we get a lot of questions on. So eligible meats include beef, pork, poultry, bison, and fish, and those could be kind of, whole birds, for instance, or different pieces or cuts. Also, something like ground beef would be eligible. Along those lines, you can have a preformed burger patty. It needs to be uncooked. Some new information that we will also be communicating via email to all fiscal year 23 grantees is that effective immediately, ham is no longer an eligible item. Some of you will recall that there was a communication sent that it was eligible, but based on new information provided by the USDA, it's no longer eligible. So please note that, and again, we'll be following up with an email soon with more information about that. Bacon would not be eligible. Roast turkey breast, as long as there's no additives, flavors, or colorings being added, that's eligible. Smoked turkey, again, no additives, flavors, coloring is eligible. Sausage and brats, we get a lot of questions on. These are eligible if they're uncooked and they contain minimal salt or seasoning. However, if it's something like Italian sausage that has multiple spices or herbs or seasonings being added, that would no longer be eligible. Similarly, a brat that has added ingredients like cheese or wild rice would not be eligible. Hot dogs are not eligible. And then for non-animal protein, eggs and tofu are eligible. With the tofu, would need to be made here in Minnesota with Minnesota-grown soybeans. Some additional examples, grains and legumes, you can buy, wild rice, oats, wheat berries, flour, if it's being grown with Minnesota wheat and milled here, something like pasta that's made with Minnesota grown wheat and made here would be eligible. But things like that are pre-baked, so breads, buns, or other baked items are not eligible. Pre-made granola would also be not eligible. And then finally, items like maple syrup or honey are eligible. Something like jam, though, that has a lot of sugar and other ingredients being added is not eligible. So again, we know that kind of all of those details of what are or are not eligible items can get a little confusing. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out if there's ever any questions that you have. So as Emily mentioned earlier on, these grant funds are really looking to support market development for socially disadvantaged producers and small businesses. So these are two target groups for the USDA, and they align really well with work that MDA is doing to support emerging farmers in our state and be supporting our small farms and businesses. So we really encourage you to think about how you are expanding your work with socially disadvantaged producers and small businesses. And then you will be required, or you are required on the quarterly reports that you submit to answer whether or not the producers, whether they're farmers or businesses or food hubs, if the original producers of the products you're purchasing identify as socially disadvantaged or as small businesses. So just to provide a little bit of information on the different ways that you can be sourcing your foods, you can be buying directly from farmers, or you can be working through a food hub or aggregator or a distributor. If you are working through a hub or aggregator or a distributor, just make sure that you are connecting with them to ensure that the products you are buying are in fact coming from Minnesota farms, and that the products are continuing to be kind of made, processed, and stored within within the Minnesota borders or within 400 miles. And we do have, quite a few different distributors here in our state, as well as hubs or aggregators. So some examples, there's the Minnesota Farmers Market hubs there are several located around the state. There's Sprout Food Hub in Little Falls. There's the Good Acre in St. Paul. And then I know that many grantees are working with their kind of mainline distributors like IFD or Upper Lakes Food to identify items that are eligible for this grant. When looking to connect with new farms, I encourage you to start at the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory. That's a great starting point just to see who are some of the farms near you. You can also visit a local farmers market. That's a great place to connect with farmers. And the Minnesota Farmers Market Association has a really nice searchable map to find what farmers markets are located near you. Attending local food shows and events are a great way to connect with local producers. So for example, the Feast Local Food Trade Show is happening next week in Cannon Falls. There will be a lot of different local producers and food makers there, and that could be a great way to make new connections. I believe the registration is still open, and you can check that out, but buyers are able to attend for free. And so that's on the 21st in Cannon Falls. And then finally, just ask around. You can talk with other schools near you or retailers or restaurants, just find out if they're working with any local producers, and if so, who. And then there's also different, folks in your community who may be able to connect you. So your county-based extension educators are a great resource. Similarly, I know many districts are working with their local statewide health improvement partnership coordinators to connect with farmers. There's also, farm service agency offices, and then different kind of regional farm chapters. So the Sustainable Farming Association, for example, has regional chapters that you could be reaching out to get connected with farmers in your area. This is just a quick look at what the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory looks like. So if you go to minnesotagrown.com, you'd want to look at the top bar on the screen and select the wholesale directory, which you see circled in green here. And then when you get there, you can search by item. So you could search, for instance, carrots. You can also just not type anything into search and just look at the map and kind of zoom in to see producers near you. And so again, it's a kind of a great starting point just to see, of the producers in the directory who's located near you and might be someone you want to reach out to. Some tips for when using the wholesale directory, as I mentioned, just zoom in and see who pulls up in your area. The keyword search is a great way if there's a specific item you're looking to buy. And then I'd also encourage you to check out the additional filters button, which is here in that navy blue spot above the map. And in there, you can filter by products. And then also a new feature this year is that you can filter by producer identity. So that is a great way to specifically identify emerging farmers in the wholesale directory. Once you click on a farmer's listing on the directory, definitely scroll down to check out the business experience and distribution sections. That can be a way to get some helpful information, around kind of how far they deliver or if they're able to ship, and if they've worked with other schools before. And then finally, farmers can link their websites. So from their wholesale directory, you can get to their website if they have one to get some additional information. And so with that, I'm going to now pass it over to Jamie Anderson, who's joining us from the Minnesota Department of Education, who has some great reminders and also just kind of tips around procurement. So I'll pass it to you, Jamie.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. So Jamie Anderson, I'm the Farm to School and Early Care Consultant for the Minnesota Department of Education. And just wanted to share some friendly reminders about procurement and standards and product specs and things of that nature. So the procurement standards when purchasing local produce or locally produced items are very similar to what you would normally do in traditional procurement. So you want to ensure that there is full and open competition, which means that you are not limiting any potential local growers or producers. You're not limiting their opportunity to submit a bid, and that you're allowing everybody to submit bids and proposals for any item that you are looking for. And also making sure that you're not placing any unreasonable restrictions on growers, and that there's no conflict of interest. So again, just making sure it's open to all that are interested in submitting a bid. You want to make sure that you're working with responsible and responsive vendors. So ensuring that your vendors are capable of meeting the conditions of the contract and of what you're looking for. So for example, if you need delivery to 5 sites, but the vendor can only deliver to 3, that would not be responsive to the needs of the contract and what your district needs. You also want to make sure that your vendors are responsible and that they can successfully perform and meet the criteria that is needed in the contract. So, thinking about, what's their previous reputation, maybe talking to other districts or customers they may have, just to get a good idea and making sure that, they have a good history of being a responsible vendor. The one area that is a little unique to farm to school is geographic preference. So you are able to put a geographic preference on your proposals when you are looking for local foods. There is no standard federal or state definition of what geographic what a geographic preference or a locally sourced item is. But definitely for the purpose of the Agri Farm to School grant, you will want to make sure that it is produced and grown in Minnesota, so you're eligible for that reimbursement. So determining geographic preference is completely up to the SFA. So, you could say it has to be grown and produced within, 20 miles of our district, or maybe it's 100, whatever it might be. So it's really up to you as to decide what that categorization and label is for geographic preference. Okay, next slide. So this is just a quick diagram showing just kind of, how procurement, the procurement methods that you can utilize when purchasing. So in Minnesota, we have a threshold of $175,000. And if you are going to be purchasing in a transaction something that is above that threshold, then you will need to go to a formal procurement method. And so you'll have to do a sealed bid or a request for proposal. If your purchases are less than $175,000, then you can look at doing an informal procurement method, and you can investigate the small purchase informal method or the micro purchase method. So the small purchase method, your transactions have to be less than greater than $10,000, but less than $175,000. On this diagram, it's showing what the federal procurement method is. In Minnesota, we have it slightly lower. So small purchase, very similar to bids and a buy. You submit your request, you get your bids, and then have an evaluation tool and go ahead and make your transaction with the awarded vendor. In micro purchasing procurement, the value of the single transaction must be less than $10,000. And micro purchasing, we see that very often in farm to school procurement. And basically, you want to make sure if you're working with farmer A, you make that purchase of your apples. Maybe the next time you're, buying apples, maybe then you look to farmer B. And so you're spreading your purchasing power and your dollars among a variety of vendors that are eligible. The next slide is, again, this is kind of a busy slide, but I did want to show, and just because I think it's a nice visual, again, it gives a little bit more detail as to the different procurement methods. Since we'll be sending out the slides afterwards, I think it's a kind of helpful reference to use. And then product specification. So after you've determined what procurement method you're going to use, you need to decide what you're asking for. So a lot of different things go into determining, the product specs for the item that you're looking for, thinking about, how often do you need it? How much do you need? Thinking about the size, the shape, the quality. Are you going to be using it on the salad bar? So you want it, very clean and unblemished. Are you going to be roasting it? Is it going to be in a soup or a sauce? So maybe it can have some imperfections in it, and it can still be utilized in the recipe that you would like to use it in. Thinking about, do you want it washed? What's the shelf life? It's going to be if you wash it or it's not washed. Do you want your staff to be cleaning off, chunks of soil when they get their potatoes or carrots? And then thinking about packaging, and then do you want it to be frozen? So it can have a longer shelf life if you're not ready to use it right away. So just kind of all of these different ideas go into, thinking about writing your product specs, particularly when you're thinking about local foods. If you do not know the answers to all these questions, that is just fine. It's one of those things, do your best. And, even when you have a good relationship with your farmer, even asking some of these questions to them and working together to come up with a solution that works really well for both of you is also very helpful. Okay, so the next slide is an example that Minneapolis Public School utilizes when they're sending out their product specifications. So I think it's a nice diagram that lists the items that they're looking for. It talks about the description of them, how they're going to be serving them. I really like that it gives some visual aids. I think is very helpful. They compare everything to the size of a baseball, which a lot of people are kind of familiar with what that size looks like. So I think it offers some really helpful guidance that can be universal. And then the next slide is just another example of a way that you could do your product specifications. So the top one is talking about what they're looking for in their carrot purchases. So they want an orange carrot. They talk about what they're going to be using it for, and then how long they want their carrots and how big. They talk about, you know, the condition that they want to receive them in. So they want it rinsed and free of any soil or debris. And they also talk about when they want their deliveries and how much each delivery ideally they're looking for in each delivery, and then the total amount of weight. So, and then the bottom example is from the Good Acre. And so these, again, very nice visual aids, giving a really good example for farmers as to the quality of the product they're looking for, the size. I really like the red and green no yes diagram. It's very clear what they're looking for in their products that they're purchasing. And I think I am turning it back over to Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So I'm going to be talking about reporting and reimbursement requirements for these grants. All grants are paid on a reimbursement basis. So that means that you are paying for your product and then submitting the proof of payment to MDA so that we can then pay you. So these grants, like I had mentioned early on, originally they were set to expire in February of this year, but we got an extension from the USDA. So the new expiration date for these contracts is January 31st of 2025. So that sort of moved out our quarterly reporting requirements in our timeline. So this slide shows the due dates, the new due dates for the remainder of the reporting quarters. So the next report is due on April 10th. You can send all reporting requirements, documentation to me. Previously, it was me and Ann Couge who were working on this together. She's since retired, so I will be taking on this role. So please send all your documents to me. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also submit your reports early. If you've finalized your expenses for this quarter, you can send them in now if you want. Just however it works for you. So next slide, please. So for the quarterly reporting, the documents that we need. So in order to receive your payment, you'll want to send in your Farm to School reimbursement worksheet, which is, we send out an Excel template for that. And that just sort of organizes your requests so that we can sort of track who you're purchasing from, how much you're requesting for your reimbursement. And then for each item included on that reimbursement sheet, you'll need to submit your proof of purchase. So that would be your invoices, your receipts, things like that. And then also proof of payment that shows that the payment has cleared from your account. So that would be like a canceled check, a bank statement, a credit card statement, something that shows that that it's exited your account and has been paid to the farmer or vendor. If you have not made any purchases this quarter, we still need to know. So please just send me an email with the reimbursement worksheet filled out that just says 0 expenses this quarter. That just saves us a little bit of time from having to try to track down reports and make sure we have everybody included in our reporting to the USDA that we do after we do your reports. So yeah, we'll go to the next slide, please. So this is an example of the reimbursement worksheet for food contracts. At the top of this, you'll see the specific information that we're looking for. So the distributor, if you worked with one, so that would be a food hub or your main food distributor. Then we need to know the farmer or the producer name, the location of the farm, so the city and state to ensure that it's a Minnesota grown product. We need to see the date of the purchase, the amount that you're asking for reimbursement that's Minnesota grown and raised. And then if there were any associated delivery or shipping costs, outline those on your reimbursement worksheet. And then you'll total those 2 columns up for the full amount that you're asking for reimbursement for. Next slide. So then this is just a continuation of the reimbursement worksheet. There's several columns, but at the very end, there are two columns that are really important for our reporting and requirement to the USDA. One question is, does the farm identify as a small business, yes or no? And then does the farm's majority ownership identify as socially disadvantaged? And those are those questions that you would be asking of the farmer or producer, and then just relaying that information to us through this spreadsheet. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. And then this is also just a friendly reminder that any food or equipment contract that's over $25,000 is required to have a site visit. So that's when MDA staff will come out to your school, and we'll just, check in, see how your program's going. If you're serving a farm to school item, that's a really great time for us to come out. If your staff is using the equipment that you purchased, we would love to see that as well. Site visits must be completed before we can issue your final payment. So when you're ready for us to come out, just send me or Kate an email and we'll coordinate with you to find a time that works best. If you have a special event in mind, like if you have, a special meal with a farmer coming up or something, that's a really great time for us to come out, because we love to just see your whole program in action. So please invite us to those things. And we can do site visits this spring yet, or we can do them next fall or early winter before your contract is expired at the end of January. So I'll pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Emily.
Mhm.
Also, I'll just say, when you have a great, local meal or a farmer visiting, if you get pictures, please send us pictures. We love to see them and see the great work that you're doing. And it's also really helpful for us to be able to share some of the great work that you're doing with the USDA and show the impact that this funding is having. So send us any pictures that you have and you're willing to share. So we want to spend just a little bit of time now talking about resources and support. So some of you may have heard of the Minnesota Harvest of the Month program, but this program offers a lot of free resources that can support your farm to school efforts. So if you go to the Minnesota Harvest of the Month website, you can access free posters, stickers, clings, and recipe cards for the 15 different Harvest of the Month food items. There's also a recipe hub where you can access kind of standardized recipes for your use in providing meals. And then there's also kind of home, or like recipes scaled for home use or classroom use, that are great to kind of include in any newsletters that you're perhaps sending out to families, or maybe you have a teacher that wants to do a classroom lesson that connects with some of the local items you're serving in the lunchroom. There's also standards-based lesson plans and activities and really great videos. So the whole purpose of Harvest of the Month is really to try to build connections between the classroom, cafeteria, and community. So I encourage you to check out the website for the resources. We also offer quarterly meetings where we gather and share kind of what's happening in some districts. We share resources and just kind of try to build some community and connections around people who are participating or using the Harvest of the Month resources. There's also a new monthly newsletter, and there's a QR code here. And I encourage you, if you've already been receiving Harvest of the Month emails from us, you are already subscribed. But if you don't and you want to join, please subscribe to the newsletter. The Minnesota Grown program also offers free materials that you can use in the cafeteria to help promote your the local items you're serving. So two of the popular posters are here. The Local Foods Brought to You by poster is like nice and laminated, and then you can use a dry erase marker to write in kind of what's on the menu that day. Local Food Be Buzzin' is just a great pun, about honeys and bee, and so it's fun and pretty to have in your cafeteria. There's also Minnesota Grown clings that you can order. So if you go to the Minnesota Grown website, you can order those marketing materials for free as well. All right. I can't remember if I'm doing this slide or you, Jamie. I think I am. But we have another newsletter that's a great one, which is the Root Review. That is the quarterly newsletter from the Minnesota Farm to School leadership team. And that is a great way to stay up to date on kind of all things farm to school related in Minnesota. So if you don't receive that email, you can scan this QR code. We'll also be sending out the links afterwards. But that's, again, a great newsletter to get so you can stay up to date in the farm to school world. All right, and then we also offer monthly technical assistance office hours for farm to school and early care, and those happen on the second Wednesday of the month from 2:30 to 3:30. And you can come with any and all of your farm to school and early care related questions. We'll help to find answers or connect you with resources or other forms of support. And you can also just join if you want to listen in and kind of hear what everyone else is asking. You might pick up on some good tidbits of information. You can just register once, and then it's a recurring monthly Zoom call. So we hope to see you there if you ever have any questions. All right, and I'm going to pass it to Jamie for this slide.
Hi, so thanks, Kate. We wanted to take an opportunity to share with everybody that we are going to be hosting the first Minnesota Farm to School Institute this year. So it's a unique, very professional development opportunity to grow your farm to school efforts in your school or your district. So there'll be an in-person experience in the middle of June. It will be at a location in the metro area, kind of the kickoff for the Institute. So at this in-person opportunity, we'll be doing a lot of specific planning with your team to create an action plan. There'll be a lot of learning opportunities, professional development, some amazing speakers and food, and just really an opportunity to kick off a really amazing adventure for your farm to school team in your school or district. Another really amazing part about the Institute is that you will be paired with a coach. That will be your coach for the duration of the Institute. And they'll be there to help you along with creating your action plan, finding resources, working through any challenges or obstacles that may come up. So we're really, really excited about the Institute. The applications are open now. And I will put the link to the applications, and we have kind of an FAQ page that's available if you want to learn a little bit more about the Institute and have just some further questions. But you can also feel free to reach out to myself or Kate if you have some wonderings that maybe aren't answered in the FAQ section. So again, take a look, and if it's something that you feel would be beneficial for your school or your school district, please feel free to reach out and even apply.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, and then we also wanted to just mention that the Minnesota Farm to School leadership team and the Farm to Early Care Advisory group in Minnesota are it's a large group of partners that kind of work and to support farm to school and early care efforts in different ways around the state. And so this group of partners is working to develop our first Minnesota Farm to Kids strategic plan, which will kind of provide a comprehensive vision and plan for how to support and expand local food purchasing and agriculture education in K-12 schools and early care sites around the state over the next 3 to 5 years. And with this plan, we hope to be able to provide even better support to producers, schools, and early care providers, have a really clear kind of like direction for our work, and build momentum behind farm to school and early care. And we want to be more strategic in how we align our kind of different programs that we're offering, and be more collaborative. And we want to build and advance equity in our food system. So we are in the process of doing a lot of stakeholder engagement right now. Some of you perhaps attended the Minnesota Farm to School Roadshow events. That was kind of the kickoff to some of our stakeholder engagement. We're also going to be doing focus groups and group conversations over the next couple of months. And so the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy will be helping us with some of those group conversations, particularly with school food service providers. And so if you are interested or willing to participate in a group conversation, we would love to hear from you, to hear about your experience with Farm to School and your ideas or needs for kind of how we can even better support Farm to School in the state moving forward. So if you are interested in being participating in a group conversation, feel free to email myself. Otherwise, we will be following up with more information with Nora, who works for the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, who will be leading and facilitating those group conversations. So stay tuned for more information, but we'd love to hear from you so we can incorporate your ideas into the plan. All right, so that is all we had for you for hopefully just refreshing your memory on your fiscal year 23 grants. This is Emily and my contact information here at MDA. We will also in the follow-up email include Jamie's contact information if you want to reach out to Jamie at Department of Ed with any questions related to the procurement rules. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have information, contact information for Nora at IATP, who will be leading those group conversations. But with that, I can stop sharing my screen and just see if there's any questions that folks have for their fiscal year 23 grants.
It looks like there was one question in the chat earlier about ham. So if you've already ordered ham, what do you do was the question now that ham is recently an ineligible item. So Connie, if you just want to email us afterwards, we can connect with you about that. It's kind of a gray area, sort of, just because it's brand new eligibility. So feel free to send us an email and we'll figure it out with you.
Any other questions?
So my name is Krista. I have a question and I'm sorry that I couldn't find the chat. Is it okay if I just ask the question?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So when we're doing the recording of the farmers on that form that you'd like us to fill out, and say we use them over and over again, do you want us to fill out that demographics information each time? Like if we're using Good Acre over and over again, can we just use it once or do we need to keep?
Yeah, that's a great question. So please do, even if you've reported in the past, please do answer the two questions if they identify as socially disadvantaged and if they identify as a small business each quarter. Please answer those questions because we are kind of taking each of the quarterly, all the reports that come in for that one quarter, and we have to turn around and kind of aggregate and compile that for the USDA. And so having it on your latest quarterly report is helpful. One other note about that is if you are buying from the Good Acre or another food hub or a distributor, please make sure that you are answering those two demographic questions for the individual farmers. So let's say you bought broccoli from the Good Acre, you should be answering those questions about the individual farmer who grew the broccoli. So if you're then buying multiple items from the Good Acre, as an example, you should be answering those questions for each of the individual farmers that you're listing that the Good Acre purchased from to fulfill your order. And similarly around like dairy products or meat, we need each of those individual farmers identified and then those demographic questions answered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we can certainly wrap up early. We really appreciate everyone logging on today. Given that contracts were extended and knowing that some of you are kind of still in the ramping up phase of your projects, we wanted to just do this refresher to make sure you had all the information you needed to be confident in spending your funds. But please know that Emily and myself are always here to answer questions that you have, and offer support in any way we can. So definitely reach out if there's any clarity we can provide, or support that you're looking for. And this was recorded, so we'll send out the recording afterwards. And we'll also send out a lot of the links that we mentioned as well. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.